Greetings, Mana Guzzlers. Welcome to the Noob Report, and I'm your host, Ryan Kinney. And today I wanted to try something a little different, just to give you insight into how I build commander decks. While I don't mind investing money for quality, I mean, let's be real. Sometimes we all need to save a little bit of money, and it's always nice to surprise our opponents with things that they may not see coming. So one of my favorite things to do when brewing is to look for budget solutions that aren't as common to both surprise my opponent and do so at a very low price entry point. I want to take you through some of my finds for this week that would maybe help you surprise your pods and save a little money doing so. So the criteria before we get started is that each card that I'll discuss is under $1. And while that may seem extreme, I think a lot of people would be surprised with the type of power you can get for just under $1. So let's just jump right into it. The majority of this video I'll be on Scryfall because it's a great resource for doing things like this where you want to limit things based on price or color or effects. So I found these enchantments that may be new to some people called the retreats. And if you look here, we'll just go ahead and switch this to checklist view for a second. You'll see that none of them are over the price of 15 cents. So they're definitely within the criteria, but let's look at what they actually do because that's what matters. They all have landfall abilities, so every time a land enters the battlefield, it triggers their effect. Another consistent fact with all of them before we get into the nuances is that they all cost 2 and then a particular color, except for the white one, which, 3 isn't so bad. So it means that they can be brought out relatively early off of a land and Soul Ring play. So retreat to Coral Helm, for example, Coral Helm, rather. Every time a land enters the battlefield, you can tap or untap a target creature, or you can scry one. So these are both, great abilities, especially for a card to be so very cost effective. I run a deck, I'll link it at the end for Estrad, that pretty much focuses heavily on enchantments and also stasis. I didn't know this card existed at the time, but something like this would not be a bad idea, especially considering that a land entering the battlefield is something that's always going to happen. You may miss a few land drops, but when your ramp is fixed, you're going to get this trigger off at least once per turn. So it's really, really a cool effect. Retreat to Emeria, the one that costs 3 and a white. Its 2 abilities creates tokens, which are 1/1 white tokens, and the ability to give creatures +1/+1 until the end of the turn. While I'm not so crazy about this second ability, just getting a token off of something as natural as casting lands is definitely something I think is really, really cool and benefits a lot of decks. It's in the correct color as well to be in Selesnya Shade decks. So Anointed Procession, Parallel Lives, Doubling Season, you can have those out next to something like this. And if you're running Karametra, for example, you're already in a space where you're pumping out an insane amount of lands. So I definitely think this is a really cool find. Retreat to Hagra is definitely my favorite. I run a lot of battle-based decks, so the ability to give +1, +0, and Death Touch to a creature upon a landfall trigger is very useful. And then also the ability to inflict 1 life damage to each opponent and gain a life off of landfall triggers is definitely something I'm interested in. Retreat to Kazandu. It gives a +1/+1 counter to a target creature, or you gain 2 life on each landfall trigger, which once again is not bad, especially considering that life is a resource in Magic. So if you can surge your life up a bit higher, you can actually get a lot more utility off of lands that require a lot of cost to life. Last is Retreat to Valakut. As lands come in, target creature gets +2/+0, which is cool for first strikers or double strikers, like Alesha or some others. And target creature can't block this turn. All right, so those were the retreats. Let's jump into the next card, Knowledge Pool. This card coming in at 77 cents definitely meets our criteria. And although it's a 6-drop, I think that we'll stick to that. I like that. This suite of effects is definitely something that could be really interesting in a lot of pods. There's a card called Perplexing Chimera that, it switches up the board because as it comes in, It can offset effects and swap control. And it creates a zany type of interaction that a lot of pods are missing. Knowledge Pool is very similar in that effect. It has an imprint ability that impacts everyone at the board. When it enters the battlefield, everyone exiles the top 3 cards of their library. And from there, whenever a player casts a spell from their hand, that player exiles it. If the player does, they may cast another non-land card exiled with Knowledge Pool without paying that card's mana cost. So it's just zany. Who knows what you're going to pull off the top? And it's a great way to, if you're running especially colorless decks with a lot of Eldrazi, put out cards that are just normally too high to cast, especially if they're full in your deck. And then you can turn a lower drop cast into something that's much more dangerous. Your opponents can also be hindered by this type of effect because we all do a lot of planning, especially when we decide to keep our first hand after mulliganing, tutoring, and so on and so forth. To put out something like this early on and make people really think about how they're going to get access into these random resources and also how to get around the trickiness of losing their cards to the Knowledge Pool is something that I think is tons of fun. All right, so the next card I want to talk about is Fleet Feather Sandals at 9 cents. It's not an exceptional card. It's not something that's going to, completely destroy everyone at the table, which is, pretty popular of a desire in EDH. But for 2 and 2 to equip, to give something flying and haste is definitely something that's really cool, especially in decks that run Infectors or cards that trigger certain effects once they deal out commander damage, like, I'm sorry, not commander damage, combat damage, such as, what's his name? The all-red Grenzo. The all-red 2-drop Grenzo. Something like that, or Lord of the Void, which is already a flyer, so I guess it doesn't matter. But there are some other examples. I'm sure you could think of a few if you challenge yourself to do so. Imminent Doom is the next card I want to talk about. For 2 colorless mana and a red, this enchantment enters the battlefield with 1 Doom counter on it. Whenever you cast a spell with CMC equal to the number of Doom counters on Imminent Doom deals that much damage to any target. Then put a Doom counter on Imminent Doom. So, in a deck that has a pretty consistent curve where you run a lot of 1-drops, like maybe Mana Dorks, Swords of Plowshares, Path to Exile, Mother of Runes. There are a lot of, Sarah Ascendant. There's a lot of really, really great 1-drop cards that you can tool towards Imminent Doom. And then you can start to scale it up into the 2-drop cards that we run. And 3-drop is just a very popular point of the curve already. And it's just free damage off of a card that only costs 3 to cast. And for 12 cents, I think that it's a cool card to consider, especially if you're running a deck that does spell slinging, like Izzet, for example. Izzet fits the curve between 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth, and dishes out a decent amount of damage to warrant a card like this. So I definitely thought it was pretty cool. The next card is the one I'm most excited for, Spellbinder. It's only 63 cents. It also has an imprint ability. When Spellbinder enters the battlefield, you may exile an instant card from your hand. Now, whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may copy the exiled card. If you do, you may cast a copy without paying its cost. Now, this isn't equipped 4 and 3 to cast, but in a lot of equipment decks, you can run things like Pure Steel Paladin, Hammer of Nazan, and another card I'm going to show you at the end of this that helps you cheat that out. So I wouldn't worry so much about that. But this imprint ability, unlike Isochron Scepter, which I'll admit is a better card, but this has a special ceiling. You can put any instant card on it, and then upon connecting with any opponent, you trigger that effect. And since it is an equipment, if the creature is hated off the board for any reason, you can obviously just drop Spellbinder onto another creature. So I think to show you how impactful something like this would be, I wanted to show a couple of cards that could go into Spellbinder and make an impact. On the next tab, yes, this is kind of cheating because it is a $7 card. This will be the only one above my budget that I will show you, but to, kind of cheat around it, just don't go buy it. So if this card is put inside of Spellbinder, since it does untap all creatures you control and create an additional combat phase, you actually can go infinite. So if you put this inside of Spellbinder and hit an opponent, you would trigger another combat phase, and then you'd be able to do it over and over and over again. So it's pretty cool. But aside from anything that's above our $1 budget, I just typed in anything that's under $1.01. And yeah, you could do less than or equal to $1, but I want it to be dramatic. Any instant in Commander that you can run, and you'll notice a lot of these cards. Things like Brainstorm, counters like Arcane Denial and Negate, Putrefy, which hits an artifact or a creature that can't be regenerated, Mortify, Terminate. It's just so many really great cards. The rituals fit this bill. You have the charms. There are so many of them that can just go inside of Spellbinder. And the charms are especially special because obviously they have different modes. So it gives you an option upon each connection of which direction you would like to go in. It's really, really cool. There's a lot of draw cards. There's a lot of targeted removal. The list just goes on and on. Render Silent, blinking cards, Dramatic Reversal, which although is a very powerful card, is also very cost effective in our meta. There's High Tide, Spell Swindle. There's Copying Instance, Crackling Doom. There are just so many amazing cards. I'm just going to scroll because who knows what pops out to you. But just keep in mind that anything that has an X cost is a little bit different because you wouldn't be able to do it. But I think you'll notice as you scroll down, there are just so many other options that don't require X that could fit into your deck and of each color. So it's definitely something that I think is worth considering, especially for so little money. There are commanders such as Saram that can just put out a card like that and just go wacky. I am running Saskia with an equipment base, so I purchased a copy for myself and I'll be experimenting with it. I really see a lot of potential. Okay, so now it's time for the last card. I didn't put it in order of best to worst or anything to that effect, but let's just jump into it. It's Quest for the Holy Relic. It is only 12 cents. There's quite a few enchantments that focus on quest counters and eventually getting into a place where you can pop them and do something really cool. But out of the ones that are within our budget, this one seems to be the best. It's just a 1-drop, and every time you cast a creature spell, it gets one of those little quest counters. And once you hit 5, you pop this card, search your library for an equipment, put that equipment into the battlefield, and immediately drop it onto a creature you control. So I really like this card. I know that there are other cards like Stoneforger Mystic and Stonehewer Giant that are a lot better in a lot of people's eyes, but I think that being able to put out something like this very early on, especially in a deck like Saskia or any creature-based deck that runs dorks, you're just putting out a bunch of creatures and you hold this up until the opportune time. You pop it and slide something into play. Now, obviously, it is a little dangerous because it is telegraphing to your opponent what direction you're going to, but that's where you have to make the decision to set it up in the correct way. There are plenty of really amazing cards that stop your opponents from playing on your turn, such as Grand Abolisher. There are cards like Vexing Shusher that can interact with someone trying to stop your plans. So I would definitely say it's just a great piece to sit there and hold up space until you're ready to do something really, really powerful. You can go grab Sunforger with this, Grafted Exoskeleton. You can grab Conqueror's Flail, which if it does attach to something, will shut your opponents from casting on your turn. So that's all the cards that I had to show you that are under $1. One of the best things about Commander is that you get a lot of power for a lot of budget if you take the time out to just do the research and look. I definitely think that this is a really, really comprehensive list for my play style, but it may not be for, everyone watching. If there's any cool cards that are under $1 that you want to tell me about, please do so in the comments. Thank you so much for tuning in and have a wonderful day. Happy playing.